On Rosewood Avenue, parents waved at the man who swept the steps every morning. Harold Dunn wasn't just the janitor. He was the one who fixed squeaky doors, patched leaking ceilings, and carried forgotten backpacks back to classrooms. Teachers called him the quiet backbone of the school. But behind the navy uniform and the tired smile, something far more sinister was taking root. It began in whispers. A star athlete collapsed in the gym. A freshman girl never made it home from practice. Weeks apart, no clear thread, until the funerals multiplied and one detail kept returning. All of them had walked the east wing where Harold worked. What no one realized was that inside his storage closet sat padlocked doors, unmarked cans, and a handwritten list of names with red XS scratched through the dead. 9 victims at first, then more, not by chance but by design. This is the story of a community that trusted the wrong custodian, and of hallways meant for learning that became a sealed chamber of death. Welcome to Justice Uncovered. Subscribe and turn on the bell, because what hid behind the mop and bucket was only the beginning. Under the white glare of floodlights, firefighters climbed a ladder toward a shattered classroom window. At 9 a.m., cameras captured one of them leaning inside, then emerging with a small figure wrapped completely in a white sheet. The firefighters' gloved hands were blackened by soot, the sheet streaked with gray ash. Parents pressed against the cord and screamed as the stretcher was lowered. A mother's voice cracked through the sirens. "That's my son. That's my son." Her cry was drowned by the rising wail of another ambulance pulling in. Paramedics sprinted toward a cluster of bodies laid out on the asphalt, each covered in white. Monitors inside the vehicles beeped in erratic bursts before fading into flat tones. A medic slammed his palm on one device, shouting, "Clear." As defibrillator paddles sparked against a teenager's chest, the monitor blinked briefly, then returned to the flat line. The boy's arm, blackened at the wrist, slipped off the stretcher edge until another medic tucked it back beneath the sheet. Police radio crackled with overlapping commands. "Unit 4, lock down the east entrance, copy." Another voice cut through. "We've got 17 confirmed. Repeat, 17 confirmed under transport." The number was repeated again by dispatch, cold and mechanical, as parents collapsed against the barricade. Some pounded on the police shields, demanding to be let through. A father shoved a phone into an officer's chest, screaming, "He texted me. He said the doors wouldn't open. He said they were locked." Inside the building, helmet cameras recorded hallways filled with black smoke curling along the ceiling tiles. Locker doors hung open like mouths, their paint blistered by heat. Fire hoses sprayed down walls where bright posters of sports teams peeled away in dripping sheets. One rescuer's breathing mask camera caught the beam of his flashlight crossing a corridor of chained double doors, the padlocks glowing faintly in the heat. The footage ended abruptly as he coughed, shouting for backup. By noon, the schoolyard was filled with first responders standing in rows, shaking their heads. Rows of body bags lined the shaded side of the gymnasium. Reporters pushed microphones toward the fire chief, who stared down, helmet still on, refusing to speak. Helicopters circled overhead, the thrum of their blades vibrating across the parking lot. Parents clutched photographs of smiling children in school uniforms, pressing them to their chests as police guided them toward a staging area. That evening, broadcast footage from the local station cut to the interior of St. Mark's Chapel. The camera panned across 17 small caskets, each draped in white fabric, arranged in a perfect row beneath the stained glass windows. Identical bouquets of lilies had been placed on each one, the cellophane still carrying the same store label. The sound inside was a layered chorus, low sobbing, stifled coughs, the shifting of wooden pews. At the front, a priest spoke without amplification, his words lost beneath the sound of a mother screaming her child's name. In the back, uniformed officers stood against the wall, faces drawn, whispering into radios. A detective adjusted his tie, flipping through photographs clipped to a file. The images showed twisted padlocks, scorched chains, and the blackened handles of emergency doors. Another officer leaned in and muttered, "All exits were sealed." Every last one. His words barely carried over the organ's dirge. The camera returned to the row of caskets. The lilies were so uniform they appeared manufactured, each bloom stiff and pale, their petals catching the stained glass light like porcelain. The bouquet seemed almost staged, as if delivered in bulk. Outside the chapel, television vans lined the street, their antennae raised, transmitting the images across the city. On the chapel steps, a reporter faced the camera. Behind her, the candles of a growing vigil flickered against the night wind. She paused, waiting for the director's cue, then said in a steady voice, 17 lives lost, their final journey marked by flowers from the same corner shop. Her earpiece buzzed. She listened briefly, then repeated the update. Authorities are investigating reports that emergency doors were locked from the inside. The shot held steady on the candles as one flame went out in the wind, leaving behind a wisp of smoke. But this was only the beginning. The personnel file of Harold Dunn recorded a date of birth in 1961, a hiring date in 1985, and a line stamped in bold. 25 years of continuous service. A faded photograph showed him in coveralls holding a broom, smiling next to the principal at a school assembly where he was given a plaque for dedicated service. The local newspaper printed the photo with the caption, "The man who keeps Rosewood High spotless." For decades, teachers described him as dependable, punctual, and trusted with every master key. Students called him Mr. D, a nickname written in chalk on the staff lounge bulletin board beside a drawing of a mop bucket. Court documents later filed in county archives told a different record. Divorce papers bore a shaking signature from his wife, dated 3 years earlier. A notation on the final page read, "Respondent not present." Attached receipts showed a foreclosure notice and outstanding debts to 3 credit companies. A payroll ledger from the school district, obtained under subpoena, revealed deductions for loan garnishment and reduced hours. By the year of the fire, Harold's take-home pay was half what it had been a decade earlier. Neighbors gave statements that he lived alone in a 1-bedroom apartment above a tire shop. He left early every morning, came home after dark, one said. Another recalled the sound of his boots on the metal staircase around midnight. His mailbox often bulged with unopened envelopes. Inside the school, his presence was constant. Surveillance cameras in hallways routinely captured him pushing a wide mop in slow arcs, earbuds hanging but never connected to anything. A teacher recalled, he'd tap the broom handle against the wall twice, like he was signaling something. Students described him as quiet, polite, always moving. He never yelled, one said, just nodded. An English teacher recounted one afternoon when she saw him standing at the back of her classroom long after dismissal. He held a small spiral notebook, copying names from the grade board. When she asked what he was doing, he closed the book and said only, "Maintenance log." The entry was not reported at the time. Staff schedules showed he volunteered for late shifts, offering to lock up after evening events. Security footage from multiple nights between March and May captured him in empty corridors past 11 p.m. In one sequence, he stopped at every classroom door, twisting the knob, then writing something in his notebook before moving to the next. Another clip showed him standing at the base of the stairwell, staring upward for several minutes before shutting off the light. Custodial supply logs indicated Harold ordered more padlocks than any other employee in the district. Receipts were signed with his initials. He said he needed them for storage. A clerk testified, "We didn't ask questions." A coach reported seeing him one night in the gym, dragging chains across the bleachers. He said it was for securing equipment, the coach told investigators. Financial stress showed in other records. Bank statements subpoenaed after the fire revealed repeated overdraft fees, cash withdrawals late at night, and a single deposit of $42, 17 labeled reimbursement. Colleagues recalled him drinking from a flask near the dumpsters, his hands shaking as he lit a cigarette. Despite these signs, trust in him remained intact. Parents waved at him during drop-off. One mother told police, "He was the safe face of the school. We thought nothing bad could happen under his watch." 2 weeks before the blaze, a storm rolled through the town. Rain hammered the school roof, wind rattled loose shutters. At 10 p.m., a maintenance camera above the east entrance recorded Harold in his hooded jacket, moving steadily from door to door. He slid heavy chains through handles and snapped padlocks shut. He tested each door twice, pulling hard, then moved on. The microphone on the camera picked up the metallic click of each lock echoing under the rain. At the last door, he leaned against the frame, watching the empty lot for several minutes before stepping back into the shadows. The footage ended with him walking away, the beam of his flashlight swinging across puddles. Every ground-level exit was sealed. The rain continued to fall, masking the sound of the final lock closing. On March 12 at 4 p.m., the clerk at Harrison's Hardware filled out a receipt for 6 padlocks and 20 feet of steel chain. The customer, Harold Dunn, placed cash on the counter and offered no identification. Said he was fixing up a storage area. The clerk later told investigators store security footage captured him tucking the items into a canvas bag and walking out without hurry. 2 days later, he appeared at another hardware supplier across town, purchasing the same type of locks in smaller quantities. Receipts obtained by detectives showed no pattern of delivery, only walk-in cash transactions. By the end of March, invoices traced through district procurement logs revealed orders for cleaning agents far in excess of normal use. Labels on 2 shipments listed industrial ammonia solution, in quantities marked for commercial warehouses, not schools. The paperwork bore Dunn's initials. Forensic accountants noted that line items on the delivery slips were altered in pen, the chemical described as floor treatment. Handwriting comparison confirmed the edits were his. A delivery driver recalled unloading one of the shipments behind the cafeteria dock. "The smell hit me before I even cut the straps," he said. "It burned my eyes." He just stood there with a dolly, wheeling it into that closet like nothing was wrong. The driver told investigators he pulled his sweatshirt over his nose to keep from coughing. Surveillance footage from the dock camera at 6 p.m. showed Dunn guiding the dolly, the containers stacked and wrapped in plastic. He disappeared inside the utility corridor and did not re-emerge for 30 minutes. Teachers began to notice subtle effects. An art instructor reported that after walking through the east hallway one morning, she felt her throat sting, eyes watering until she reached fresh air. "I thought it was paint fumes from the classroom," she told police. A student was sent to the nurse after vomiting twice in math class, later discharged with a note from the doctor diagnosing possible food allergy. The timing coincided with Dunn mopping the same corridor an hour earlier. Security footage placed him rolling a bucket and wringing the mop repeatedly, pausing at each door. Inside his storage closet, discovered later by investigators, a spiral-bound notebook lay on a shelf. Pages showed sketches of the school floor plan, each hallway drawn with ruler straight lines. Red ink circles marked certain classrooms, all noted as high occupancy. Attendance rosters later confirmed these were rooms with the largest class sizes. The sketches were dated and cross-referenced with janitorial schedules. Forensic imaging revealed indentations from previous pages, suggesting repeated rewrites of the same diagrams. A social studies teacher described a moment in late April. Passing his closet, she heard the faint clang of metal and assumed he was shifting supplies. The sound repeated with a hollow reverberation, like a container being set down hard. When the door swung shut behind him, she noticed the faint tremor of a shelf as if something heavy inside shifted. She mentioned it casually to a colleague but did not report it further. By May, patterns sharpened. A second hardware store clerk remembered Dunn buying more padlocks, this time bundled with lengths of heavy chain and a crowbar. "He kind of smirked when I asked if he needed a receipt," she testified. At another location, security cameras recorded him loading 3 metal gas cans into the back of his sedan. The purchases were in cash, no paper trail except the video timestamp. 8:14 p.m. Medical records collected weeks later showed an uptick in unexplained complaints among students who used classrooms on the east side. Symptoms included nausea, coughing, dizziness. In 4 separate cases, doctors prescribed inhalers for respiratory irritation. None of the children had prior asthma diagnoses. Nurses logged these incidents without linking them. At 9 p.m. on May 14, the maintenance camera near the boiler room captured Dunn dragging a metal drum across the tile floor, the sound echoing down the corridor. He heaved it into his closet, closed the door, and leaned against it as though steadying the weight. When the door latched, the feed recorded a faint metallic rattle from inside, like liquid sloshing in a container. The image froze briefly on his hand, turning the lock before the camera switched to static. Parents at that time remained unaware. They saw only the man sweeping the steps in the morning, nodding as buses arrived. Teachers passed him in the halls, keys jangling on his belt. Students laughed at his old radio tucked in the cart. None of them saw the diagrams or the altered invoices. None of them heard the rattle of chemicals sealed behind a steel door. The pattern of purchases, the chemical smell, the drawings of crowded classrooms, all converged into a preparation hidden in plain sight. The locks accumulated, the fumes lingered, the notebook filled with red marks. And in the darkness of the utility closet, the drum shifted again each time the door shut, heavy enough to make the shelf tremble. At 6 p.m. on May 20, the school gym was still echoing with the sound of sneakers on varnished wood. A boys' basketball scrimmage had just ended when 15-year-old Marcus Hill collapsed near the free throw line. CCTV footage showed him dropping suddenly, his arms flailing once before he hit the floor. Players gathered, shouting his name. A whistle blew, followed by the coach's voice. "Call 911 now." Paramedics arrived within 7 minutes. Body cam footage from one responder showed the boy gasping, lips tinged blue. Oxygen was applied, compressions attempted, but by the time he reached County General Hospital, the monitor registered no pulse. The official medical record listed the cause: toxic inhalation fatal. No prior conditions were noted. His death certificate was signed at 7:14 p.m. 3 days later, on May 23, a 14-year-old girl named Emily Vargas stayed after class for choir practice. Witnesses later recalled she laughed with friends in the east hallway at 4 p.m. At 4:12 p.m., she staggered against a locker, clutching her chest. A teacher rushing to her side reported to dispatch, "She can't breathe. She's turning pale." Despite CPR administered before the ambulance arrived, Emily was pronounced dead on arrival. The hospital log read, "Acute respiratory failure fatal." CCTV showed her last steps unsteady as other students scattered in panic. Within the next 2 weeks, the school community was struck again and again. On May 29, 16-year-old Jordan Lee was rushed from history class after collapsing mid-sentence during a presentation. His friends later described the classroom air as stale, chemical, like bleach. On June 1, another student, Danielle Brooks, was found unconscious in the east stairwell at 9 a.m. The custodian who discovered her called in, voice shaking, "Student down, no response." She was declared dead within the hour. On June 4, a physics teacher, Paul Granger, age 42, was lecturing when he began coughing violently. Students recorded phone footage of him gripping the edge of his desk, trying to breathe as his face reddened. Emergency services extracted him from the building, but his condition deteriorated en route. The death report noted respiratory collapse consistent with toxic exposure. His colleagues stood outside the ER, stunned, one whispering to another, "First the kids, now staff." By June 8, 2 more students from the same wing were gone. 14-year-old Nicole Sanders was found slumped at her desk, head on folded arms, eyes open but unseeing. The next morning, 15-year-old Malik Roberts collapsed in the cafeteria line, tray still in his hands. Security footage showed him falling forward, food scattering across the floor. Students screamed, some fleeing, others kneeling beside him until teachers pulled them back. Medical records compiled by County General over this 3-week period identified 6 student fatalities and 1 faculty member, all with similar findings. The diagnostic phrase repeated across charts read, "cluster deaths of unknown origin." In each file, toxic inhalation appeared as the suspected cause, though no external chemical spill was reported. Autopsy results noted irritation of the airway, inflamed lung tissue, and no pre-existing conditions. Parents gathered outside Rosewood High, taping photographs of their children to the iron fence. Teddy bears, flowers, and handwritten notes accumulated daily. One father pressed a picture of his daughter against the gate, voice breaking as he told a reporter, "She went to school healthy. She came home in a bag." Television crews broadcast the images each night, the fence transforming into a memorial wall. Inside the faculty lounge, teachers spoke in hushed voices. "It's the East Hall again," one said. "Always the East Hall." Another replied, "They need to close it down. Something's wrong there." Maintenance logs showed Harold Dunn continuing his rounds, wheeling his mop bucket along the same corridor. CCTV caught him unlocking and relocking the doors late at night, his silhouette moving steadily down the hallway where every victim had last been seen. Hospital administrators convened a meeting on June 10. Dr. Karen Morales reviewed the files, spreading them across a conference table. She traced each case with her pen, lips moving as she repeated the ages, 14, 15, 16, 42. Different genders, different classes, she said to colleagues, but all the same corridor. Her assistant highlighted the timestamps. Every patient had collapsed within hours of being inside the East Wing. The breakthrough came when Dr. Morales overlaid the floor plan of Rosewood High on a chart of the deaths. The dots aligned almost perfectly along a single stretch of hallway cleaned and secured nightly by Harold Dunn. "They all connect here," she stated, tapping the paper. Her words were captured in the meeting minutes later turned over to investigators. As evening fell that same day, parents gathered again at the school gates. Candle flames wavered in the wind. The photographs stared back from the fence, smiling faces in yearbook poses. Behind the locked doors, the east hallway lay silent, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly over polished tile. In the hospital records, 7 deaths were now circled in red. Every line pointed back to the same corridor, the same man with the keys, the same mop bucket rolling steadily across the floor. By June 15, headlines in the city's largest newspaper carried a bold title across the front page, "Death Wave at Rosewood High." The article listed the 7 victims by name and age, accompanied by photographs of their school portraits. A broadcast segment opened with footage of parents chanting outside the district office, holding signs painted with phrases, "Close the school now," and "Protect our children." Police reports confirmed that more than 200 parents gathered on the front lawn demanding the building be shut down. The chants and the pounding of fists on the locked gates were captured by local television crews, their microphones filled with the sound of grief turned into anger. District officials called an emergency meeting that same afternoon. Transcripts from the session recorded a facilities manager stating, "We need an external inspection immediately." Within 24 hours, a safety engineering firm was dispatched. Their survey log noted multiple irregularities. On June 17 at 2 p.m., engineers tested every emergency exit. 7 of them were discovered with padlocks welded into place. Forensic photographs showed shiny steel hardware contrasting with decades-old door frames. None of the modifications appeared in maintenance records. Unauthorized, the lead inspector told detectives, all 7 locks are recent installations. Inside the classrooms, teachers described a lingering stench. "It's metallic like blood or rust," one said in a sworn statement. Students called it the hallway smell. During walkthroughs, investigators documented Dunn's mop bucket parked against the wall. The liquid inside was dark, releasing a harsh, chemical odor strong enough to make officers step back. One detective wrote in his notes, "Metallic fumes cling to plaster and tile." Forensic swabs later revealed traces of ammonia compounds on classroom walls nearest the bucket. On June 20, detectives searched Dunn's custodial closet. Behind a stack of folded tarps, they found a binder labeled work orders. Tucked inside was a loose-leaf page with 22 student names written in block letters. 9 of them were crossed out with a red X. Cross-checking with the coroner's list, investigators confirmed the 9 marked names matched the 9 deceased, 7 students and 2 faculty members. The discovery was logged as Exhibit 14B. Photographs of the page were distributed across the task force, circulated with the phrase target list handwritten in the margin by one officer. A parent who lost his son collapsed at the school gates when told of the list. "He's on it," the father asked, voice caught on camera. An officer nodded once, crossed out. The parent's sobs were audible over the clatter of shutters from news photographers. Meanwhile, testimonies from surviving students added further weight. During a recorded interview, 14-year-old Alicia Turner recalled the most recent fire drill. "The alarm went off. We lined up like normal, but the door wouldn't open," she said. "Our teacher slammed it with his shoulder until the frame cracked. That's the only way we got out." Her words were confirmed by the teacher himself, who told police, "Padlock on the inside. No reason it should have been there." CCTV footage from the drill corroborated the account, showing students clustering by the east exit while their instructor struck the door repeatedly. Tensions escalated across the town. News anchors described it as a plague centered on one building. Each night, candles multiplied along the fence line, their wax dripping onto the pavement. Families left backpacks, shoes, and folded letters beneath the photos. The smell of melted wax mixed with the faint chemical odor still seeping from cracks in the school's bricks. Investigators widened their scope. On June 24, a team from the county forensic unit disassembled one of the compromised doors. When they stripped away the paint, they uncovered a modern padlock mechanism hidden beneath a coat of beige enamel. Photographs documented the lock gleaming under the stripped paint, evidence tags attached to each fragment of metal. One investigator stated to the camera, "This door shows no legitimate maintenance. Someone concealed the hardware deliberately." That same evening, detectives presented the evidence to district officials in a sealed briefing. A projector displayed the images, mop buckets stained dark, the red X list, and the padlocks encased under paint. The superintendent asked one question: who had access to every exit? The answer came without hesitation. Harold Dunn, a detective, replied. At 9 p.m., officers searched his storage room again, photographing every surface. Chains coiled in corners, more locks stacked on shelves, and his notebook open on the desk with another floor diagram inside. The diagram bore fresh red ink circling the auditorium, annotated with numbers representing seating capacity. Each photo was time-stamped and filed. In the days that followed, the media referred to the mop bucket itself as a symbol of the deaths. A reporter stood outside the school on June 27, saying to the camera, "The bucket once meant cleanliness. Now parents call it the bucket of death." Her segment cut to footage of investigators wheeling the bucket out on a dolly, sealed in a transparent evidence bag. The smell was described by one officer as like metal burning in the air. The community's anger swelled. Shouts at vigils turned to chants of justice for the 9. Detectives moved cautiously, piecing evidence into a pattern. Each detail converged: unauthorized locks, the target list, the noxious fumes. Reports compiled for the district attorney used the phrase deliberate obstruction and chemical exposure. The final set of photographs from the safety inspection circulated on July 1. They showed close-ups of the 7 padlocked exits, paint chipped away to reveal new hardware beneath. The caption beneath one image read, "Padlock concealed under fresh paint. not listed on maintenance schedules, likely installed within the last 3 months. The photos were leaked to the press. On the front page the next morning, the headline read, "The locks were painted shut." The article printed the images in full, padlocks glinting through scraped paint. Parents recoiled at the sight, the locks that sealed their children inside. The town now knew the exits had not simply failed. They had been sealed deliberately, hidden in plain view, every surface painted over to appear untouched. The hidden camera above the East Wing intake grill recorded at 2:11 a.m. The lens showed a man in a gray work jacket pushing a janitor's cart. He paused beneath the vent, lifted an unmarked plastic jug from the lower shelf, and unscrewed the cap. A thin stream of clear liquid poured into the intake panel through a gap by the filter bracket. The audio picked up only the hiss of airflow and the faint click of his keys against the cart's handle. He tilted the jug longer than a minute, recapped it, and set it back beside a coiled length of chain. He looked down the empty corridor, then pushed the cart away. At 2:19 a.m. he returned, repeated the action at a second vent, and left again. The time stamps marked each step. By 7 a.m. the corridor lights were on and students drifted in, recorded by the same camera as pockets of movement in the edges of frame. Custodial logs placed Harold Dunn on site at 6 a.m. He was visible on another camera near the auditorium, wheeling his bucket, stopping periodically to check door handles. At 7:42 a.m., a maintenance mic mounted above the admin office captured him muttering as he wrung the mop. "Clean enough to burn." The words were faint but intelligible when replayed through audio enhancement. At 10:03 a.m. in room E214, the computer lab microphones picked the rhythmic clack of keys, the hum of tower fans, and the tap of a teacher's marker against a whiteboard. The camera caught her hand lowering to the desk, the marker rolling, and then her body slumping forward across a keyboard. Students stood abruptly, chairs scraping tile. One shouted, "MS. Cole." Another yelled for help. The door handle rattled audibly. Several students pushed at once. "It's stuck," someone cried. A boy banged his shoulder against the frame while others pounded with fists. The class phone dialed out at 10:05 a.m. The recorded 911 call carried a girl's voice high and sharp. "The kids are choking. The door won't open." Coughing filled the line, along with a chorus of frantic knocking. Security footage from the hallway showed students crowding the glass, faces pale, hands flat against the pane. A teacher from the next room sprinted into frame with a metal chair, swung twice, and shattered the narrow safety window. He reached in and forced the lever. The door clicked after 3 tries and swung open against resistance. Students spilled into the corridor, some crying, some doubled over. 2 boys carried MS. Cole out under her arms, her shoes dragging. In the nurse's office, an AED was applied. The monitor gave a brief stutter, then a long tone. Paramedics arrived at 10:18 a.m. and took over compressions. The ER report logged her arrival at 10:31 a.m. At 10:49 a.m., the attending physician signed the line, "Pronounced deceased." The preliminary note read, "Respiratory collapse, suspected toxic exposure." In the hallway outside, the air carried a sharp, metallic odor. Officers who responded first later described their eyes watering and throats burning. A student wiped at his face and left smeared gray residue on his sleeve. "It smells like the bucket," a girl told a school resource officer, pointing to the corner where the blue mop bucket always sat during morning periods. Investigators swabbed the nearby walls and the vent cover. Field test strips changed color. Samples were sealed and logged. That afternoon, an interview room at the station held a younger custodian in a green polo. He looked at his hands and spoke quietly to detectives. "He says it all the time," the man said. "Not yet. Wait." He provided times he had heard it in the last month. At 5 a.m. once near the boiler room. Last week, 4:30 a.m. by the east doors. He said it like he was talking to the floor. The statement was recorded, signed, and added to the case file. Investigators reviewed the previous night's surveillance in a darkened conference room. The vent footage replayed twice, then again in close-up. Liquid pooled, ran along the metal lip, and disappeared. A technician froze the frame and circled streaks on the grill, then matched them to residue captured later by the forensic team. A detective spoke in a clipped voice. "Document every intake he touched." Another replied, "Copy." Calls from parents swamped dispatch after the teacher's death was reported on local radio. Officers were sent to maintain order at the gates. TV crews filmed students led to waiting cars, many wrapped in blankets, faces hidden. The smell lingered in the air beyond the building. On the evening shift, a plainclothes team trailed Dunn's routine from camera to camera. At 7:06 p.m. he keyed into his closet. The door opened on shelves lined with cleaning products, coils of chain, spare padlocks still in plastic. He lifted a red can with a printed label that read "Floor Wax." The camera above the doorway followed him to the main hall. He knelt by the entrance doors and set the can down, then stood without opening it. He looked at the locks, ran a hand along the painted seam where metal met wood, and returned the can to his cart. He disappeared toward the east wing. Between 8 p.m. and midnight, patrol units reported multiple ambulance transports unrelated to the earlier fatality. Students who had been in the building for after-school activities complained of headaches and chest tightness. Hospital intake forms at County General logged 5 youth patients that night, all discharged after oxygen and observation. Symptoms consistent with irritant exposure. The forms read. The time sequence, when plotted later, traced a line through the same corridor filmed that morning. At 1:42 a.m. the next night, the vent camera activated again. Dunn moved with measured steps, a flashlight clipped to his shirt. He set the unmarked jug on the floor, unscrewed a side panel with a screwdriver from his pocket, and poured. The mic caught the trickle, then his breath, then silence. He repeated the process at a second panel, then wiped his hands on a rag. When a key fell from his ring and clinked on tile, he stooped, picked it up, and laughed once under his breath. The audio spiked. He whispered something the mic barely caught. When filtered, the words aligned with the previous phrase, "clean enough to burn." At 9:15 a.m. the following morning, 2 students in E212 were treated by the nurse for dizziness. One vomited in a classroom trash can. "Metal taste," he told the nurse. The teacher propped the door open with a rubber wedge and sent the class into the hallway. An assistant principal called the district to request a temporary closure of the east wing. The request was logged but not approved before noon. Detectives, now certain the pattern involved air intakes and sealed exits, coordinated with the fire marshal to prepare a controlled entry. "We move tonight," the marshal said on a recorded call. "Document everything he places." A team installed an additional micro camera above the main entrance to capture any objects left near the doors. The building sat under cloud cover at 4:56 a.m. The parking lot was empty, the streetlights flickering yellow. The new camera framed the glass of the main doors and the thin line of the threshold. At 5:03 a.m., Dunn's cart rolled into the shot from the left. He looked small inside the frame, hunched against the morning chill. He lifted the same red can, the one labeled "Floor Wax," and set it on the mat. His hand lingered on the handle. The camera's infrared picked up the warmth of his fingers as he pressed the label smooth with his thumb. He looked to either side. No one else moved in the lot. He slid the can tight against the base of the door, tilted it slightly, and nudged it into shadow beneath the push bar. Then he stepped back, the label bright in the lens, a neat printed word for a liquid that smelled like gasoline. He left it there and pushed the cart away. The camera held on the can beside the entrance, the frame divided between glass reflecting the dim sky and the red container crouched at the threshold. The lot remained dark. Outside, the town was still asleep. Inside, the vents waited. At 7 a.m. on Monday, June 30, students filed off buses and through the front entrance of Rosewood High. CCTV footage showed Harold Dunn at the rear of the building minutes earlier, looping heavy chains through the gates and snapping padlocks into place. He moved systematically from one access point to another, the sound of steel clanging captured on exterior microphones. By 7:20 a.m., every perimeter gate was secured. Teachers arriving late found the side doors unresponsive, their keys turning uselessly in locks hidden beneath fresh coats of paint. At 8:01 a.m., a plume of smoke rose from the basement furnace room. A custodian on the opposite side of campus radioed in, "Fire in the boiler corridor." His transmission cut off mid-sentence as the line filled with static. Security footage from the east stairwell showed smoke rolling upward in waves, ceiling lights glowing dim through the haze. Within minutes, alarms should have blared, but none activated. Students in the second-floor hallway began coughing, some clutching their throats, others pressing against windows. At 8:07 a.m., a ninth grader dialed 911 from her cell phone. The call transcript recorded the words between ragged breaths, "We can't get out. The doors won't open." In the background, high-pitched coughing and pounding reverberated against metal. At 8:09 a.m., another call came from room E204. "Kids are choking. Door handle jammed." Dispatchers sent units immediately, engines pulling from the nearest station less than 2 miles away. By 8:12 a.m., body-worn cameras of first-arriving firefighters documented the chaos. Screams echoed through sealed glass, fists pounded rhythmically on doors, silhouettes of children pressed against panes clouded by smoke. An officer struck a crowbar against the main exit. Sparks flew. The lock held. A second firefighter swung an axe, splinters spraying, but the steel core resisted. The camera microphone captured the desperate chant of students inside. "Help us! Help us!" At 8:18 a.m., smoke blackened the upper hallways. A math teacher's body was seen collapsing against the glass partition of his classroom, students around him beating their fists against the frame. When firefighters forced a hole through the outer wall with hydraulic spreaders, 3 children stumbled out, coughing, faces streaked with soot. One paramedic shouted, "We've got pulses weak." Another voice cut through, "Multiple still inside." The death toll rose in less than 20 minutes. Reports from County General documented 43 fatalities by asphyxiation, including 3 faculty members who attempted to shield students with wet cloths. Autopsy notes later confirmed carbon monoxide saturation levels exceeding lethal thresholds. 60 survivors were pulled from windows, dragged through shattered frames, or carried down ladders. Many required oxygen tanks and intubation. Paramedics lined them in rows on the front lawn, Roman IV hanging from improvised poles, parents screaming as they searched among the injured. At 8:25 a.m., a sheriff's deputy spotted Dunn moving along the exterior fence with a key ring in hand. Dashcam footage from the patrol car showed him bending to snap another lock onto the secondary gate. The deputy shouted, "Drop it, now." Dunn looked up once, then reached for the chain. 2 officers tackled him to the asphalt. The scuffle lasted less than 10 seconds. In the recording, a mother's voice pierced the background. "He locked them in." Parents surged toward the struggle, restrained by deputies. Detectives searching his cart at the scene found a spiral notebook. Pages were filled with diagrams of classrooms. One page bore the chilling phrase in red ink, "Trial run complete." Next, middle school. The discovery was logged at 9:12 a.m., sealed in an evidence bag, and handed directly to the lead investigator. By mid-morning, aerial footage from news helicopters broadcast the school transformed into a disaster site. Fire hoses arced water into shattered windows. Students' backpacks lay scattered across the grass, half-burned notebooks strewn near the curb. The sound of sirens never ceased, a continuous chorus over the crackle of collapsing timbers. Reporters described parents fainting at the sight of stretchers wheeled past, sheets drawn over small frames. Inside the charred East Wing, forensic teams later photographed doorways fused shut, padlocks warped by heat but still locked. One image showed a handle twisted until bent in half, the chain above it intact. Another photograph captured a padlock glowing dull red against blackened metal. When recovered, the lock was tagged, bagged, and entered into evidence. At 10 a.m., the fire was declared under control. The final sweep of the building confirmed no more survivors. 43 dead, 60 rescued. The youngest victim was 14, the oldest a 48-year-old teacher. The press conference at noon was grim. The fire chief's voice cracked once before he steadied himself and said, "The exits were sealed. They never had a chance." Cameras flashed as the superintendent stood beside him, face ashen, silent. Back at the smoldering ruins, officers sifted through debris. Charred desks stood in rows, screens of computers melted into twisted plastic. Amid the wreckage of the main hallway, one firefighter held up a piece of metal. The bodycam caught the detail, a padlock blackened, edges blistered by flame. Despite the destruction, its shackle remained closed, unbroken. The firefighter raised it in a gloved hand and muttered into the mic, "Still locked." The camera froze on the image as it was bagged for evidence. On the morning of July 8, the photography studio once run by Harold Dunn stood sealed. The glass front door was crossed with yellow evidence tape, a white placard taped to the frame reading, "Do not enter, ongoing investigation." Through the glass, camera tripods still leaned against the wall, their shadows stretched long in the dust. Reporters filmed the exterior from the opposite sidewalk, their lenses framing the boarded windows and the flicker of candles left on the curb. By late July, the ripple of distrust had spread far beyond the school. Marriage planners reported cancellations of scheduled photo shoots. One company filed statistics showing a 40% drop in wedding photography contracts across the county. A bride interviewed outside City Hall explained to a television crew, "We don't want cameras at all. Not after what happened." Her words were broadcast against footage of another couple posing deliberately without a photographer, only family phones raised shakily in their hands. At community hearing, parents demanded new regulations for freelance photographers. "We trusted them with our children, our milestones," one father said, his voice echoing in the gymnasium now converted into a meeting hall. "We'll never see light the same way again." The transcript of the meeting recorded applause, followed by silence as officials outlined proposals to license every professional in the trade. Industry numbers confirmed the collapse. Data released in August by the Professional Photographers Association showed bookings for weddings, graduations, and family portraits had fallen to record lows. Studios once busy every weekend reported empty calendars. Bankruptcies doubled. Rental companies logged dozens of abandoned cameras returned with cracked viewfinders and scorched sensors. On September 1, the city unveiled a memorial in the central square. Witnesses described rows of metal easels holding framed wedding photographs. Each print had been deliberately processed with the faces erased in a wash of white light, the edges blurred to resemble the flare of a flashbulb. When the sun hit at noon, the photos glowed like pale ghosts, indistinct bodies standing where smiles once were. Families laid wreaths at the base of the display. Children traced the outlines of the blank faces with their fingers. The unveiling was documented on live broadcast. The mayor's voice carried through a microphone. "We remember the lives taken and the trust betrayed." Behind him, cameras clicked in rapid succession, but each shot seemed muffled against the images of erased brides and grooms staring back from their frames. Reporters covering the memorial noted the symbolic reversal. Light, once the promise of happiness, now cast the color of mourning. News anchors repeated the phrase throughout the week. Candlelight vigils multiplied across neighborhoods, the flames held in glass jars that reflected back the faces of grieving families. In the district archive, photographs from the crime scene remained sealed in labeled folders. Image 24A showed the padlocks recovered from the school ruins, still closed despite the fire. Image 31C showed the spiral notebook with red ink across the page, and Image 40B captured the final haunting tableau, 2 chairs draped in white fabric, set for the bride and groom at a staged reception, both seats empty. In front of them, on a table covered in ash, sat a camera under a heavy black cloth. The lens pointed outward, silent and unblinking, as if waiting to record a wedding that would never begin.